And so if you're thinking about choosing somebody as a godparent for your kid and you ask them when's the last time you went to Mass or when's the last time you went to confession, and they just can't think of the one, or they're like, yeah, I went to Mass a few months ago, and just don't choose them.
Red flag.
Yeah, massive red flag. Don't even be like, well, maybe let's talk about this. Like, no, right off, they should not be a godparent to your kids. Merry Christmas, bro.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to all y'all.
Yeah, boy. Yeah.
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, it's pretty cool to have an episode coming right after Christmas.
Yeah.
We're in the family stomping grounds. This
Exactly.
is our family Christmas tree.
It looks kind of real. It's not real at all. It's been around for about 30 years.
Yeah, it's older than us, actually.
Yeah, it is. Had this all the way back when our family lived in California, which is a long time ago.
It was, yeah, before he was even around.
Existed.
Funny that he's the only one who went to school in California. Nate has had more memories in California than I did, and I was born there.
Born there, yeah. It's crazy.
But
it's crazy.
So we got some of the presents around the tree. They're slowly growing.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
And, it's been about a year that we've been doing videos together. I mean, I know you did some videos, fall of 2023 with other people while I was at school, but it was Christmas time when we recorded our first video together. So
yeah, the one on the Trinity, I think, was the first one. Yeah, which is actually
Deep dive.
A really good episode.
It's not bad. No.
So it doesn't have a lot of views, but you should definitely go and check out that episode.
Yeah. To my knowledge, we don't commit heresy even once.
Which is a shock. Well, to our knowledge.
To our knowledge. That's
to our
big
limited Trinitarian theological knowledge, but
exactly.
So yeah, it's awesome. It's a good. The monks get an opportunity to come back to visit their family over Christmas, so that's why I get to be here.
We're doing a family gift exchange on. I guess.
Yeah, today actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Very soon.
We're all meeting up here at our family house. So it's gonna be super chill. And in the spirit of the season, I got you a little gift.
Oh, let's go.
So yeah, Merry Christmas.
Oh, thank you.
That's not the only thing I'm getting. Don't worry.
No, but it's a little foretaste. It's a very cool bag too, by the way.
Yeah, right.
Archangel Gabriel.
Super delicious.
I assume. Okay, let's see. Ooh. Oh, if it's money, I have to turn this in.
Yeah. Do you guys get to keep money at all?
No.
Really?
Well,
do you have to give it to the abbot?
We have to give it to the prior.
The prior just collects.
Yeah. Well, because it's technically nothing. I shouldn't have anything personal like that.
Yeah.
Certainly amassing wealth. I do have a bank account, but that's based on I have a stipend that the monastery themselves give me, and so that's for that. But otherwise, giving my own, amassing my own wealth.
Yeah.
On the side. I have heard.
Once you're a priest, does your stipend get changed at all by how many indulgences you sell in a month? Is there a quota, commissions?
So mass intentions, anyways, go directly to the community. I don't keep any of the stipends for mass intentions, and you don't sell indulgences.
Yeah, for any non-Catholics who are listening, that was a joke.
Anyways, so I opened up. It was a little pink slip, so we're going to see what it says. Oh, it's a question. What kind of Christmas present is this?
Okay, it's actually, psych, not a Christmas present. It's a smooth way of segueing into the discussion. So.
The topic for today, which is, what is the purpose, duty, and significance of godparents?
Didn't see that coming. That's crazy.
What?
What a smart question. Who could have thought of that?
Yeah. Actually, shout out to my friend who texted me that yesterday as a podcast suggestion because great idea.
Mm-hmm. And putting in a little package like I just did was also a great idea.
It gave the hype for it.
It did. Made it a little more Christmassy. But yeah, it's a cool question. We're both godparents, actually.
We are, yes.
Not with each other.
No.
Yeah, there's no such thing as gay parents.
No, that's actually... So actually, that's a... We'll come back to that, but that's actually been a question we had to resolve in Canon Law.
If you could have two godfathers?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But...
spiritual fecundity is crazy.
That's such a great line.
I'm a godfather to two kids. He's a godfather to two separate kids. They're different kids.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I'm the godfather to my niece Gemma, who's Thomas and Johanna's second. And then also to the second son of my two very good friends, Melanie and Greg, whose name is Peter. Very cute little guy.
Greg's actually been on the podcast.
Yeah, he has a while ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Gemma is 2 and Peter's 1.5 years. So the Godfather.
Yeah, dude.
And Nate is.
You're coming to my. Wait, what's this? You're coming to my house on the occasion of my daughter's wedding. You haven't seen The Godfather?
No, I actually haven't.
Anyone who's out there, you should watch The Godfather. Look up some reviews in advance, but it's a fantastic movie. Anyway, I'm the godfather to, first of all, Ellie, my niece on my sister's side. She is just over a year old. She's
Mhm.
super cute. Looks like a little doll. But man, yeah,
She
God
does.
forbid anyone try to hold her other than her mother. It's crazy. And then I'm also godfather as of just about a week ago to our other nephew, my brother Tom's youngest son, Damien James. I almost forgot his name.
So it's like, you're the godfather.
I'm a terrible godfather.
When you're like, I'm the godfather too, like, it's your nephew Damien. Like, it should not be that hard.
I know. Okay, he's super cute. He's new to the family, though. I still gotta remember his name.
Yeah.
So they're both cute kids.
Yeah, we just had that baptism, like Nate said, pretty recently. Which is, it was great. We Father Joe was a monk of St. Vincent did the baptism. Actually, a monk has done 2 of those 4 of the niece and nephew baptisms because
Did you do Gemma's?
you did Ellie's. So actually, both of your godchildren were baptized by monks.
That's right.
Father Max.
Max, that's right.
Yeah, did that one. So
Yeah.
So yeah, what before we get into like some of the church teaching and law on godparents, like what is your own belief in what it means to be a godparent, and what do you, I don't know, whether it's ideally or realistically, believe that you should be doing in your godchildren's lives?
Yeah. Well, I think the name is pretty good indicator. So godparent, I think you're supposed to be sort of a parent, an additional parent, or an assistant to the child's actual parents with relation to the things of God. So you're supposed to assist the parents in raising the child in the faith, instructing them in the teachings of our church, helping them to live out a Catholic life, either just by encouragement or by setting a good example as a role model. In the case of my own god kids so far, it's nice I don't have to do too much work for one thing because they're both under the age of 2.
Yeah, right.
So I haven't had to put in too much exhaustive work into showing them or teaching them anything about the faith because homie, one of them still learned to walk and the other one, just got out of the womb. So, but, and additionally, also their parents are solid.
Yeah.
So solidly grounded in the faith. So it's kind of nice. I think it'd be a different role, or my approach to it would be very different if I was asked to be a godparent for someone who I know didn't take the faith that seriously. Like if there's a kid who their parents don't actually care that much about the faith, or they're not living the faith in any way, or they're not exposing the child to any of the teachings of the church, then I think the role of the godparent has to be a lot more active.
Yeah.
Because you have to kind of, in a way, be a substitute for the parents wherever they might be failing. But I think in a more ideal circumstance, which is close to what we have, where the parents are aware of the faith, they themselves can teach their kids. It's more kind of a background role. You're assisting, you're playing almost like kind of playing backup, but also just being there, not just as a spiritual mentor, but also just as a homie. Like this kind of an older parent, like an additional set of parents. That's how my godparents are for me.
Yeah, that's true.
Mr. W, Mr. and Mr. W, Mr. and Mrs. W. Their full name is the Wazorics. They're wonderful people. But yeah, I've known them my whole life. They basically are another set of parents. Like they're wonderful. They always give me gifts when I was a kid. At my birthday, I see them all the time throughout the year. They're always just so encouraging. They've just been great role models and great spiritual guides for me. But also, Mr. W is just like another dad.
Yeah,
he's awesome. He's so cool. So yeah, I think it's just that, like being a spiritual guide, but also just being an older homie who can kind of take the child under their wing and guide them as they grow up.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with all of that. I have a different relationship with my godparents. So my godparents were a grandparent on each side. So my grandmother on my mom's side and then my grandpa on my dad's side, both of whom have passed away. So I don't have my godparents around anymore. And one thing that is in our situation, at least with you for both, and then me with Gemma, we're also the uncles.
Yeah.
So there's that different dynamic. There's a familiarity.
Right.
And so with grandpa and granny, they're also grandparents, which that has that kind of role.
And we lived far away from both of them.
Exactly. I did always. Whenever I did see grandpa, he did always remind me that I'm not just your grandpa, I'm also your godfather.
Really?
And granny at times would too. Especially around my first communion or confirmation. Definitely she encouraged or brought something much more spiritual, to her gifts or whatever it was. I did never really necessarily saw them as a second set of parents because they're the grandparents
they're
too.
older,
yeah,
and
they
you
were
don't even know them as well. Right.
But I see not only everything you said, but I think especially since I'm a monk on top of it, that even more than maybe Melanie and Greg, or maybe more than Tom and Johanna, also encouraging godchildren in their vocations. And maybe being a little bit more of the like be a monk, be a nun, be a priest, be a Dominican sister or something. That because a lot of parents might really believe in like the importance of vocations, but then when it comes down to their own children, they're like, ooh, I don't know. Not that I'm saying now, I do not believe that for Melanie, Greg, or Tom and Johanna. Like, they both would be ecstatic if their kids became
but that's not an uncommon story.
Yeah, but so be able to be like another voice who also like is living that particular life. So if Peter's ever to be curious about what it's like to be a priest or a monk, he doesn't have to go far. He can just go to his godfather. Particularly, and then praying for their vocation, like more specifically, feel responsible for doing that.
It's just cool, real quick, that at least for Gemma, but probably also for Peter, for much of their growing up, you're going to be the priest that's closest with them. Like out of all the family and friends that are close to them and that support them and that are there for their birthdays and whatnot, you're going to be one of the few priests. So you're kind of that one example of the consecrated life that they can look to and be like, okay, this is a touch point for seeing, first of all, just how that life looks, but also for praying for them to discern the same vocation.
So just obviously, just generally, and now we're getting some more legality and theology, but godparents, super important. So even
choose wisely.
I was gonna say you can't just pick they're a nice person.
They're a buddy.
They're they're like my college roommate. Like she's really awesome. Like I guess she'll be the godmother.
It's not just like a bridesmaid groomsman kind of thing. Exactly. Now that we have a kid, we'll let one of our friends know that we like him a lot by giving them this cool honor. No, it's actually supposed to be someone who can guide your children as well or better than you spiritually.
Because in the baptismal rite, when the priest or deacon, whoever it is baptizing the child, addresses the godparents directly, he says, are you willing and able to assist the parents of this child in raising the child in the faith? Which means that whoever the godparents are, they already have to be living out a vibrant, authentic Catholic life. I think some of our, Tom's godparents don't really do that. And I think mom and dad at that point, because I think it's Uncle John and I forget who the aunt is, but maybe at the time they were maybe still living the Catholic faith, but they don't really practice anymore. And there might be various reasons for that. I'm not saying I get it.
It's
but
not a matter of judgment, but for mom and dad,
exactly.
They didn't have the same level of awareness.
It was kind of I owe it to a brother or I owe it to a relative, and no, you owe it to your child actually
to choose a really good one
to have a good godparent. So to the point where in Canon Law, and so we're going to present the role and importance of godparents from two sides of church teaching: Canon Law, and
the
from
Catechism,
from theology. So
real quick, just wanted to say, when you are in the rite of baptism, not only the parents but the godparents take vows that they're going to help support those kids. But it might be said in a very short amount of time. The priest asks you, "Are you willing to support?" And you might just say yes or "I do." But those short amount of words are powerful, and they actually are meaningful. We sometimes get used in our Catholic faith to just saying things or consenting to things that we don't necessarily take that seriously. We're kind of actually, as a religion, famous for that. I just heard the comedian Jim Gaffigan making a joke about this recently, where he said other religions, when they have things that they're supposed to do, they take them seriously. With Catholics, it's don't eat meat on Fridays, unless you really want to. That's kind of often how we approach our Catholic obligations. But if you're a godfather or godmother and you say, I'm going to support this child in being raised in the faith, then you better do that. You better take it seriously. It's a moral obligation at that point.
100%. And actually a legal obligation for Catholics because canon law, so it's the law of the church, is binding to Catholics. So a Protestant, a Muslim, whatever, they're not bound by canon law, right? It'd basically like saying, someone in England is not bound by constitutional American law, right? Because they're outside of it. So, but those who are in the church, and simply being in the church, according to canon law, is baptized. So even if you haven't practiced at all since that point, this is still applicable to you. So that means if you're choosing a godparent and they're like, oh, well, they were baptized Catholic, but they haven't really done anything, this law applies to them.
Mm-hmm.
So you're actually also putting them in danger of
obligations.
Of obligations that they might
and
never
moral
fulfill.
responsibilities, which then could turn into moral culpability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here in canon law, so there's multiple things it talks about in baptism. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but first it says a criteria for choosing godparents. First and foremost, they must be practicing, baptized, and confirmed Catholics. Mm-hmm. But also, they should be examples of Christian living, mm-hmm. and one should be sure that they are able to help the baptized child or person understand the significance of their baptism. Which means that the godparent is like constantly calling, whether it's a child as they grow up or an adult when they get baptized, they're constantly calling them to live out the baptismal call of holiness. Mm-hmm. Of course, the parents hopefully are doing that, mm-hmm. but if not, there need to be especially, but even more so, adding to, if you're baptized, you have things that are given to you, like the grace of God, the theological virtues, all of these things, but you also have duties and obligations now. You are obliged to follow God according to the way the church teaches. Mm-hmm. You're obliged to follow the precepts of the church, all of these things. And that itself, doing those things, grows our capacity to have a relationship with God, which that is holiness. Mm-hmm. Someone recently commented on like a video, I think the one with Dr. Kangor, or with the abbot actually, about like him growing in holiness. And someone's like, you can't, like growing in holiness, that's impossible. Like one cannot grow in holiness. Like it's, because
that's
it's kind of this idea, like I think they were commenting on like you cannot earn your own salvation.
Oh, sure.
Right, but that's not what holiness is. Holiness is an abandonment of your will more and more fully to the will of God.
Right. Which happens by grace, but you can certainly do it more or less perfectly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can dispose yourself more.
Paul before the road to Tarsus, or sorry, not Tarsus, the road to Damascus, was just as holy as he was afterwards, right? There was clearly an abandonment.
Well, they were saying like, oh, well, he chose Christ, so now he's holy. And there's nothing you can do. It's like, well, Paul also, if you read his letters over time, admits to more and more of his sinfulness, which is an indicator of his growth in holiness.
Right.
Because as he humbles himself more, he's able to draw in relationship with God.
Yeah, awareness of sin is one of the signs of developing holiness.
Yeah.
But sorry, back to what you're saying.
Anyways, so I think understanding the significance of their baptism, I think that's really amazing.
Right.
And we can respond to some of these too. Let's see. So an authentic commitment to the Catholic faith that they, at least at that point when they make it, have an unwavering resolve to maintain. Mm. So if you're choosing someone who's a godparent and they at times are displaying a inconsistent conviction in their faith, they are not having a firm resolution to be consistent in the practice of their faith ongoing, which means don't choose them.
Doesn't mean they have to be flawless. None of us are flawless. But no. The reality is if the person you're considering choosing as a godparent is questioning the faith to the point of they just have passive doubts, or they're on the fence about whether they want to stay Catholic or not. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be a good Catholic godparent. You can't give what you don't have. And if you yourself don't have conviction about the faith, how can you foster conviction about the faith in your godchild?
Yeah.
And I also like that you said, part of this means they are supposed to, part of their duty is encouraging the children to understand the fullness of their own baptismal vows. Mm-hmm. And it's that might actually sometimes mean doing an uncomfortable thing like calling out your godchild.
Yeah.
In a loving way. Of course, you're like a parent. You're kind of an additional parent, so you want to do it with a great deal of love and compassion. But sometimes, if you see your godchild going down a bad path, let's say they get into teenage years or college years, and that child's actual parents aren't doing anything about it, as the godparent, it might be your role to step in and say, hey, where are you going? What are you doing?
Yeah.
And ask that tough question and open those difficult conversations, because that's kind of why the parents are bringing you in. I see this as one of the additional pluses to having a godparent is, look, when you as a parent, the real parent of the kids, are feeling maybe disheartened or discouraged, or you don't feel as strong to confront some of those challenges in dealing with your child, you have an extra set of homies to help you out. Who can kind of play backup for you and say, maybe you as a parent are like, I'm just really not able to get through to my child right now. They're having a rough time in their life, or they're kind of losing their way. They won't listen to me. They don't want to be part of the Catholic Church anymore. Now the godparents are kind of an extra team to help supplement so that they can maybe be those voices.
And, sometimes just because of parent-child dynamics and relationships, the parent might not know how to, properly address something to their child, or they might feel uncomfortable about it, and they're like, I know I need to, but almost like the fear of breaking harmony that they don't. And then that's what you can call in godparent. It's like, well, godparent, was nothing in here says the godparent is there to establish deeper harmony. He's there he or she is there to ensure that the faith continues to be maintained.
Yes.
So if they're like, okay, well, you know what? The parents need to be the good cops. I'm happy to play bad cop in a situation.
But you don't have to live in a household with a child. That's the thing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Sometimes kids don't want to hear stuff from their parents simply because they have to spend all day, every day, or all the time living in the house with that parent. It's just like the voice is overly familiar, so they don't want to hear things from mom and dad. But maybe a god mom or a god dad is a little bit more removed from the situation and a little bit more of a fresher voice, less common. So they might be actually more receptive to hearing some advice from them.
And I can totally attest to that because growing up, there'd be times where mom or dad would tell me you need to work on this, you need to do this. I'm like, they're just nagging me. Yeah. But then a week later, the dad of one of my friends, who maybe I looked up to, said something that wasn't maybe directly at me, but basically it was the exact same vein as what mom and dad had told me to work on. I'm like, I should really do that.
Yeah.
It's like,
exactly.
It's because we just naturally want to rebel against parents. It's just
familiarity does breed contempt.
Yeah, at times. Yeah. So that's the great thing about what a godparent can step in and do. It might be uncomfortable at times. It might be totally comfortable and fine.
Yeah.
Just the child just got so used to their parents that they just don't listen. I think that's really important. And that means then that the godparent has to have a level of relationship with the godchild that they can do that. Because if you talk to mom, her godfather, she barely knew at all.
Yeah. Not even a voice in her life. Yeah.
So she never had someone else. Now, luckily, mom never left the faith or anything, and it was never a risk for that. But could she have? Most of her siblings. So, could she have? She wouldn't have had the voice of a godfather to say something because he didn't have a relation. So it's up to the godparent to continue to make sure they have a relationship with their godchildren.
Right. So it should be somebody not only who cares about the faith themselves in their own life, but is also willing to form a relationship, has the ability and the perseverance to keep up a relationship with that child, and also somebody who has some assertiveness, because you don't want the godparent of the child to be someone who's so wishy-washy that they're not going to be able to be a positive influence in the child's life. Yeah, it should be someone a little bit assertive and definitely eager to form a good relationship,
or at least one of them. So you have two godparents.
That's true. You
right?
got two.
You don't
ideally both.
Yeah, but you don't want and then assertive. I think sometimes that word gets bad connotation. It's almost like overwhelming, or micromanaging.
No, I just mean assertive as confident.
Yeah, call it out for what they see, but I agree. So we'll wrap up Canon Law on one last thing. The last two things I just think are good is godparents are called to be the second only to the parents in assisting the child's religious education, which I think we already mentioned, but I think it's really cool that it calls them out. This may involve attending Mass together, praying together, and educating the children about church teaching. I really like that. That's even saying that godparents should maybe go to Mass and stuff with their godchildren. Maybe even sometimes without the parents. Okay, it's Tuesday during the summer. The kid's not doing anything. The godparent comes and picks him up. It's we're going to daily Mass. Yeah. Your parents might not be going today. Maybe your parents are working. Maybe they're busy, but we're going to go. Yeah. That, and then the last thing is that if it comes necessary, in rare cases, the godparent may have to substitute the role of parent in regards to fulfillment of religious duties. Right. If the child's biological parents are incapable or unwilling. Right. And that's a tall order.
That is a tall order. That's another way in which, for the consideration of the people that you're thinking of choosing for godparent, you should be considerate that for them. They're wait, hold on.
If I die or something happens.
If I die or I just lose the faith, then it's on them. And now I've imposed some responsibility on them and therefore some culpability. It's kind of when you write up your will, you can choose, if you're a parent and you write up your will, you can choose some other guardians to take over for you in case of your death, so that, your kids are going to be cared for. This is basically that, but with regard to spiritual matters. So you're saying, here are the guardians who would take care of my kids should anything happen to me.
And I think it's funny, or not funny at all, not funny at all, it's serious. Yeah. Profound that it says second only to the parents, which means that actually grandparents and aunts and uncles are superseded by a godparent in this circumstance.
Yeah.
So, like, spiritually, I have more responsibility to Peter than even Mr. and Mrs. W, or even, like, Nicole, you know? That, like, well, actually, Nicole's the godmother, so we share equal responsibility there. Yeah. Sorry about that, Nicole. I know you listen. I did not forget that you are my God wife. That's not. Yeah, that's crazy. That's anyways. But yeah, so that's the Canon Law side of things. Yeah. Which is pretty awesome. Yeah. I think you pulled up some stuff in the Catechism. Does they have?
Surprise, surprise, not totally different.
Yeah.
The Catechism is clearly in line with Canon Law, but just words in some different ways. So this is a lot of this comes from paragraph 1255 of the Catechism. It says, okay, one of the first duties for godparents is to assist the parents in raising the child in the Catholic faith, ensuring the child is educated in church teachings and remains faithful to their baptismal promises. So that's right in line with what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
One thing, though, I think is important that so that we read these kind of phrases over and over again, like, you know, making sure the child is educated in the faith, you know, that's something good to encourage. But we got to stop and ponder that for a second. Like, think practically what that means. What that means is that, particularly if you know the child is not being raised at home in the faith, or they're not learning much catechesis as a child, that means you might literally have to go and say, hey, like, maybe I'll visit you sometime for fun, and we're going to crack open a catechism. We're actually going to study some of the faith. You might have to teach them a little theology. You might have to teach them some of the catechism. You might just spend some time with them reading the Bible. But whatever it is, whatever the form takes, you got to actually teach them some stuff. Teach them some theology. And that's just huge. And it's kind of exciting to me to think, like, okay, at least with these two kids that I now have, the God kids, there might be moments when they're growing up when I can sit down with them with a catechism or with the Summa. Maybe we can get like a Summa for babies. I don't know if that's out there.
If not, we should totally do. Because they make
definitely be a thing.
Like Einstein relativity for babies.
Yeah,
so we should do the Summa for babies.
Yeah. Well, you know, Baby Einstein, like the show for kids.
Yeah.
There should be Baby Thomas Aquinas or Baby Aquinas.
That would actually
be sick.
Maybe that should be like our first like children's like media
program.
Thing.
Yes. I like that. But anyway, like, that's a possibility, and that's something that I should do as a parent in the future, is take an active role in helping assist those kids in learning about the faith. Or even if you know the child is really being taught the faith and they're learning the teachings of our Catholic Church, you might just encourage and foster those kind of conversations. Like, when you're hanging out with a kid, don't always be talking about something superficial or just like, oh, it's your birthday, we're here, we got you some presents. But say, okay, no, we're going to sit down and we can talk about some deep things. What have you been learning about the faith lately? Like, how's your relationship with Christ been?
Well, I was going to say that, I mean, this kind of says like catechesis and education. But I think especially, so like, I don't even know if, like, you know, parents often like think or even consider this, but I think that maybe a godparent's also a special way they could deepen that education is ask, like, how is this like applying to your actual life? Because people can learn everything tons of facts about what the church teaches. But if it has no influence on their actual spirituality, then not what's the point, but a little bit what's the point. So that maybe parents are really focused on, like, okay, making sure that they go to the CCD classes, which I'm not necessarily, I think the parents should be the ones to do it directly themselves, but that's homeschool in me. But whether it is like, oh, they're learning these things. Like, I go, great, mom and dad. But maybe the godparent should come in and be like, hey, when was the last time you prayed? What did you pray about? Do you have a relationship with Christ as a person? What's your relationship like with Mary? Or what kind of saint devotions do you have?
When was the last time you went to confession?
Exactly. Especially when they start getting older. Like teenage or college even. Like, hey, like,
odds
are you going to confession now that mom and dad aren't telling you to go?
Right. Yeah, no, that's a huge thing right there. Is one of the ways I think in which the godparent can not only be kind of a supplemental parent, but almost be like a cool older role model in the faith, like more like an older homie. Is that when the child starts getting,
you should have a homie count.
We should. I use that word so often. I'm sorry. When the child starts getting to an age where they might no longer be feeling as receptive to just hearing mom and dad telling them what to do, it might help to have an influence that's more almost on their level, in a way, a similar level of chill. That doesn't have the official like parental unit associations. Because like for me, Mr. W is actually about dad's age. So in reality, you know, he's kind of about the same influence as the dad. But in other ways, he seems, just because he's not my actual dad, he seems kind of closer to my level. So when he gives me some good words of advice or something, I'm a little bit more receptive to it, I think, at certain times, because it's like, okay, it's not my dad telling me something, it's somebody outside the family. So, like, especially when you get to like college age and you might be facing some moral struggles or whatnot, it's really useful to have that other voice. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Was there anything else from the Catechism that you wanted to bring up?
Some more. Sorry if I cut you off, by the way.
No, you're good. No, you didn't cut me off at all.
Okay, spiritual guidance. They should serve as spiritual role models of Christian life, providing support and encouragement to the baptized person through their life. So yeah, I think role models is a big thing too.
Yeah.
The godparents should actually be living Christianity.
Yeah.
And that means they should be immersed in the sacramental life. They should have a good prayer life. They should be receiving confession and the Eucharist regularly. And so if you're thinking about choosing somebody as a godparent for your kid and you ask them when's the last time you went to Mass or when's the last time you went to confession, and they just can't think of the one, or they're like, yeah, I went to Mass a few months ago. Just don't choose them.
Red flag.
Yeah, massive red flag. Don't even be like, well, maybe let's talk about this. Like, no, right off, they should not be a godparent to your kids. And they've shown by their life they cannot be a role model.
Yeah. And maybe, you could even say to this person, like, well, we were going to ask you to be a godparent, but because...
Just make them feel guilty.
Well,
yeah, call them out.
You know what? Now, people say Catholic guilt, is a thing.
It should be more a thing. It actually should be more a thing.
And what they really mean is, like, shame. Yeah, anyways. But, so let's say, like, you tell them that, right? It's like, so maybe you still could be a godparent in the future, but I think you need to take your faith more seriously if you want to do that. And maybe that's enough for that person to encourage them. Maybe they just get mad at you and you lose a friend. I don't know.
Tough. Jesus didn't say make friends. He said love people. Some of that means tough love. Like say I get married and have a child, and then by that time you're like, yeah, I'm still on indulgences. I'll be like, well, Sam, we're going to pick you as the godfather, but you're committing the sin of simony all the time. So.
I would think I would also I'd have some other
you would probably
people
also
knocking at my door.
Excommunicated, yeah. That's...
I don't know if simony is an automatic. Simony might be a declared penalty. It's interesting. There are some penalties in Canon Law that are automatic, that even if you don't know you break them, you can still incur them.
What's that mean? Like, what by penalty you mean you get kicked out of the church for?
Well, so interdict is one, which is
interdict's crazy.
Like where a person or a group of people are no longer permitted to receive any form of the sacraments,
or an entire country in the case of England in medieval times.
Right.
Yeah.
Or excommunication is another one.
Yeah.
And by automatic, let's say, so an automatic excommunication could be if a priest breaks the seal of confession.
Mm-hmm.
So even if he doesn't fully realize he did it, or that no one else around him realizes he did it, it's still excommunication automatic.
What defines breaking the seal?
So there's indirect and direct. So direct is associating a person with a sin. Indirect is acting upon something that you heard in confession outside of the confessional. So let's say a secretary tells me, if I'm at a parish, something that she's been siphoning money away from parish funds for 10 years, right? And so the next...
Saying tells you this in confession.
Yes, yeah, in confession. And then the next day at a parish council meeting, I say, well, we will no longer have the parish secretary. That's breaking the seal of confession indirectly, because I'm only acting upon information I learned in the confessional. If I learned somehow outside of it and I had both, then that might be a case where you should call the chancery and be like, okay, look, someone told me something in confession, but then they also later admitted it outside of the confession. Mm-hmm. What should I do? And they probably can give you some direction. Otherwise, though, nope. And if you say it or if you act upon it, and no one else realizes how you know it, but you don't, even if you don't remember how you learned it, but it was only confession, excommunicated automatically. Bishop doesn't even declare it.
Y'all got a lot of responsibilities, yeah.
I know, which
you
is
better
why.
Watch your step, dude.
Which is why, actually, more recently I realized. I know, you and Dad particularly have talked about, I can't wait to go to confession. Do you after you're ordained? Probably that's almost not going to ever happen.
Dang.
Except for if you really, really need to, some kind of emergency, or there's no priest for we're stuck on an island.
You're saying it's just bound to influence some amount of the way you act in our family.
Well, and also, I know so much about you guys.
Yeah.
How would I be okay, am I acting now based on something I know about them or something I heard in confession?
That's
I would drive
really
me insane.
That's really tough.
So that's why it's probably
maybe
not.
Okay.
That's a massive side tangent, which actually is, I would love to just have a couple podcast episodes
where
on
we don't worry about
the spicy, canon law of the sacraments, because
Yeah.
there's some like really interesting stuff there.
And a lot of it we're just totally oblivious to.
Yeah.
A lot of
Totally
canon law is
oblivious.
relevant to being a layperson. It's not all
Super
pertaining to
relevant.
affecting priest lives. There are so many duties and obligations that we lay people have under
There's a
canon
lot.
law that we just don't even know about. I don't know about them. So many people don't know about them, and yet we just think, oh yeah, being Catholic is all about, maybe go to mass on Sundays. I guess you got baptized and
Just do the thing.
Just do your thing.
As long as I'm a good person.
Yeah, whatever the hell that means. It's like good person. Like just what when you ask most people that when they say I'm a good person, say what do you mean by that? Like, well, I don't go around killing people or stealing. It's like that's the bar.
Yeah.
That's the bar for being a good person. It's great. It's crazy.
And that's not the bar for being a good godparent.
Exactly.
Yeah. And speaking of, and as far as canon law, like legitimately, you said earlier, and I said we'd come back to this. Maybe this will be our close about can you have like two guys be godparents?
Yeah.
No, you 100% cannot. Because the godparents are supposed to be like another set of parents, and parents are defined by a married man and woman. So you cannot confuse the child by having two men or two women, even if, like, let's say they're both married separately, and they're both married to a husband or wife or whatever, and you just like, this is like my sister and this is my best friend, and I want to choose both of them.
Yeah.
Like, no,
doesn't matter.
Doesn't. Yeah.
As Aquinas always says, grace builds on nature. So you can't have spiritual fatherhood or spiritual motherhood if it's not based on what could be biological motherhood, biological fatherhood.
Yeah. So
that's why women can't become priests. Is that simple principle? People are always like, well, why can't they? Do you think they're not holy enough? No, it has nothing to do with holiness. It's just that you can't be a spiritual father if biologically you're the sort of person to be a mother.
Right. And some people say like, well, that's a whole other conversation.
We should do an episode about that.
We have a lot of
That's
side
really
tangents we could be using on episodes, which would be fun.
Super chill.
But yeah, so there's you have to be if you have two, you actually can only have one. But if you have two, it has a man and a woman. If you have one, it could be either a man or a woman. And technically, if let's say you have like a really close friend, or let's say your brother, for instance, is practicing Catholic, and his wife is not a practicing Catholic, but maybe she's Lutheran. She hasn't converted yet. She can technically be listed as like a Christian witness, and like take the sort of role as godmother, but on the actual baptismal certificate, her name is not there because she's not Catholic. Yeah. So it's only godfather. So also that's just even on document proof that the church's like, look, we have boundaries and we have guidelines, and we're not breaking that for like sentiment.
Yeah.
And that's I feel like that's what the church is challenged on their doctrines based on sentiment.
It's always sentiment. It's always everyone having their own unique reason why. Like, oh no, it's just we know you guys have your rules, but just make an exception for our feelings, please.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
like our situation. Yeah.
Nope.
And the problem is, here's the one thing is we do that sometimes for the sake of public relations or PR, because it looks nice to be making accommodations for people who are in special circumstances, but actually it just degrades respect. People cannot respect a religion that always bends its boundaries and that always making exceptions.
Well, you know what's something awesome my ecclesiology teacher would say? Without distinction, we have extinction.
Dang, that's fire.
So if there aren't distinctive roles, or if there aren't distinctive rules, eventually there'll be nothing whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what's happened in so many places. We have no distinction of gender now. So actually, my argument now is not that there are multiplicity of gender, that gender doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That's what we really have.
It's the abolition of gender.
If marriage is between not just man and woman, between then what marriage is doesn't exist. Exactly. That's what we're pushing in society. Is not so much distinction that everyone's accepted. It's extinction of every definition.
And in reality, that makes sense, right? Because the devil creates moral privation, which is lacking, right? Mm-hmm. The devil never is powerful by having an abundance. That's God. All abundance and wealth and overflowingness and multiplicity comes from God. From the devil and from the forces of hell, we get this lacking, this feeling of void, and we're gradually losing our being. That's what we experience in our lives when we go down the path of hell, that path of sin, is we gradually feel this emptiness. Similar with all these issues going on, that it's not that there's things are wrong because they're just so much. It's that things are going wrong because we're just depriving things of their actual meaning and their actual existence. So that was
don't deprive
tangent.
Godparent of its meaning.
Yeah, wait, hold on. How did we get there? Oh, yes. Sorry. We should have an episode where we're just doing tangents, so we
go
Goes
on wild
on too
tangents
long.
for 2 hours.
Yeah.
We should actually do a 2-hour episode. We haven't
Yeah.
broken like an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
start pushing some Pints in Aquinas slang.
Yes, I like that.
But this is not Pints in Aquinas. This is All Good in the Brotherhood. Thank you for joining. I'm Brother Francisco.
I'm Nate Whitaker.
I hope you have a holly jolly and Merry Christmas.
Yeah, get lit.
God bless.